For thousands of years, humanity has searched for the same answers. What gives life meaning? Why do good people suffer while the unjust sometimes prosper? Why does success so often leave an unexpected emptiness? And how should we live, knowing that time eventually takes everything we own, everyone we love, and even our own bodies? They are the oldest questions ever asked. Across centuries, kingdoms rose and vanished, fortunes were gained and lost, and countless generations came and went. Yet these questions remained, patiently waiting for every new soul to ask them again. The ancient teachers left behind no promise of an easy life. Instead, they offered something far more valuable, a way of seeing. They taught that meaning is not found in what we possess, but in who we become. Not in how long we live, but in how deeply we live. Not in escaping suffering, but in allowing it to shape wisdom, compassion, and character. They understood that life's greatest treasures cannot be measured by gold, applause, or power, because the things that matter most are invisible to the eye and untouched by time. This journey is an invitation to sit beside the greatest minds of history and listen to the conversations that have guided humanity for thousands of years. Together we will explore why success often disappoints, why suffering can become a hidden teacher, why death gives urgency to life, and why the search for meaning has never been about finding something outside ourselves. It has always been about remembering what was quietly waiting within us all along. Chapter 1. Why Success Cannot Fill an Empty Soul. The ancient teachers understood a truth that modern society often forgets. Success and meaning are not the same destination. One belongs to the outer world, where applause, possessions, and titles are measured by others. The other belongs to the inner world, where no audience can enter, and no wealth can purchase peace. The wisdom of Ecclesiastes speaks with remarkable honesty about this dilemma. It observes that generations labor, accumulate, and strive, yet everything under the sun eventually passes away. Palaces become ruins, treasure changes hands, even the greatest reputations fade into silence. The lesson is not that achievement has no value, but that anything built only upon external success can never satisfy the deepest hunger of the human spirit. The Stoics reached a similar conclusion from another direction. Marcus Aurelius governed one of history's greatest empires, commanding armies and shaping the fate of nations. Yet within his private reflections, he repeatedly reminded himself that fame disappears quickly. Wealth belongs only temporarily, and power lasts no longer than a passing season. He understood that the greatest empire a person could govern was the one within. There is an ancient story told among Mediterranean traditions about a ruler whose kingdom stretched farther than any of his ancestors had imagined. His granaries overflowed with harvests. Foreign kings sought his friendship. Musicians filled his courts each evening, and artisans carved his victories into stone, so future generations would remember his greatness. Yet each night, when the celebrations ended and the palace grew quiet, the ruler wandered alone through its empty halls. The applause of thousands echoed in his memory, but inside there remained a silence he could not explain. He summoned scholars, priests, physicians, and travelers from distant lands, asking each the same question. Why does my heart remain restless when I possess everything I once desired? Most offered complicated answers. Some suggested greater wealth. Others recommended stronger armies or larger monuments. A few proposed pleasures that had not yet been tasted. The king tried each suggestion, but the emptiness only grew. Then one evening an elderly gardener, whose family had quietly tended the palace grounds for decades, asked permission to speak. He carried no books and wore no fine clothing. Instead, he held a small olive seed in the palm of his hand. "My king," the old man said gently, "this seed does not become a tree by collecting more seeds. It becomes a tree by becoming fully what it was created to be." The king remained silent. The gardener continued, "You have spent your life gathering branches while neglecting your roots." Those words remained with the ruler long after the old man departed. Gradually, he began changing the way he lived. He visited his people without ceremony. He listened more than he spoke. He judged more fairly. He became generous where he had once been merely impressive. The kingdom itself changed very little, but the king himself became different. For the first time, his peace no longer depended upon his possessions. The ancient philosophers would recognize this transformation immediately. Aristotle taught that fulfillment comes not from acquiring more, but from cultivating excellence of character. Socrates insisted that the unexamined life could never satisfy the soul, no matter how comfortable it appeared. Across cultures and centuries, the message remained remarkably consistent. Success answers the question, "What have you achieved?" Meaning answers the deeper question, "Who have you become?" The difference changes everything. When success becomes the destination, there is always another mountain to climb, another promotion, another fortune, another victory. But when meaning becomes the destination, even ordinary days begin to possess extraordinary value. Perhaps the emptiness so many people experience today is not evidence that they have failed. Perhaps it is the quiet invitation of the soul reminding them that achievement alone was never meant to carry the full weight of a human life. Chapter 2. Why good people still suffer. One of the oldest questions ever asked beneath the stars is also one of the most difficult. Why do good people suffer? Children ask it when they lose someone they love. Adults whisper it during illness, betrayal, financial hardship, or unexpected loss. Entire civilizations have searched for its answer. The ancient masters did not pretend every hardship could be neatly explained. Instead, they invited people to respond differently to suffering itself. The Stoics approached the same mystery from another path. Epictetus, who lived part of his life as a slave, understood suffering not as proof that life was unjust, but as an invitation to discover an inner freedom that no external circumstance could imprison. He taught that while we cannot command events, we can shape our response to them. Within that response lies the birthplace of dignity. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, endured wars, plagues, political betrayals, and the deaths of several of his children. Yet his writings rarely complain about fate. Instead, they continually ask one question: what kind of person will this difficulty allow me to become? That question changes everything. Modern culture often assumes suffering is merely an interruption to happiness. Ancient wisdom saw something more profound. Hardship strips away illusions. It reveals priorities. It exposes hidden fears. It teaches patience where comfort encourages carelessness. Like gold refined by fire, character often becomes visible only after it has endured pressure. An old story from ancient Egypt tells of a young stonecutter who dreamed of carving statues worthy of the great temples. Impatient with ordinary work, he complained constantly about the hardest blocks of granite assigned to him. They were heavy, difficult, and resisted every strike of his tools. One evening, an elderly master approached him and quietly asked why he seemed so discouraged. "The easiest stones break quickly," the young man replied. "Why must I always struggle with the hardest ones?" The old craftsman smiled. "Because the soft stones become ordinary walls," he answered. "The hardest stones become the faces of kings." Years passed. The young stonecutter eventually became the finest sculptor in the region. Visitors traveled from distant lands to admire statues that seemed almost alive. Whenever someone praised his remarkable skill, he would gently touch the rough scars on his hands and remember the difficult stones he had once wished to avoid. Only then did he understand that the stone had been shaping him as much as he had been shaping the stone. Human suffering often works in similar ways. This does not mean every tragedy has an obvious purpose, or that every wound immediately reveals its lesson. Ancient wisdom never glorified pain for its own sake. Tears remain real, loss remains painful. Grief deserves compassion rather than easy explanations. Yet suffering sometimes becomes the place where deeper qualities quietly emerge, humility replacing pride, compassion replacing judgment, courage replacing fear, gratitude replacing entitlement. A person who has known loneliness often notices those whom others ignore. Someone who has endured failure frequently becomes slower to condemn the struggles of others. One who has experienced illness often treasures ordinary mornings that healthier people overlook. In this way, suffering can become an unexpected teacher. Aristotle suggested that virtue is formed through repeated choices, especially when those choices are difficult. Easy circumstances reveal little about character. Adversity uncovers what comfort often conceals. Perhaps this explains why some of history's wisest individuals did not emerge from lives without hardship, but from lives transformed by it. The mystery of suffering may never be fully solved by human reason. Some questions remain larger than any philosophy, yet the ancient teachers repeatedly agreed on one enduring truth. Hardship does not decide the value of a life, character does. When suffering becomes a classroom instead of only a prison, even pain can become part of wisdom's quiet work. Chapter 3. Death, life's greatest teacher. Different cultures honored death differently, yet nearly all agreed upon one profound insight: the awareness of death teaches us how to live. Modern society often avoids speaking about mortality. It distracts itself with endless activity, believing that silence can somehow postpone the inevitable. Ancient philosophers chose another path. They looked directly at mortality, not to cultivate fear, but to awaken gratitude. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that life is astonishingly brief when measured against eternity. He was not encouraging despair. He was clearing away illusion. When time becomes precious, trivial concerns begin to lose their power. Petty arguments become easier to release. Endless comparison seems less important. The pursuit of appearances gradually gives way to the pursuit of what truly matters. Death becomes the great teacher because it removes every false priority. An old Greek story tells of a wealthy merchant who spent decades collecting treasures from across the known world. His home overflowed with rare fabrics, carved ivory, precious metals, and beautiful works of art. Travelers admired his fortune, and kings welcomed him into their courts. As the merchant grew old, he invited a respected philosopher to tour his magnificent estate. After walking through room after room filled with unimaginable riches, the philosopher asked only one question: which of these will accompany you beyond your final breath? The merchant remained silent, The philosopher did not speak again. He simply walked into the garden where an old olive tree shaded several children laughing together while their grandparents watched nearby. The merchant stood there for a long time. For the first time in many years, he understood that the greatest treasures in his life had never been locked inside his vaults. From that day forward, he spent less time counting possessions and more time creating memories, mentoring younger craftsmen, reconciling broken friendships, and serving his community. His wealth remained, but it no longer ruled him. The greatest inheritance he eventually left behind was not measured in gold. It was measured in the lives he had quietly transformed. Ancient Egyptian wisdom often emphasized preparing not merely for death itself, but for living honorably before death arrived. A good life was considered the greatest preparation for a peaceful ending. Legacy was not something built during one's final years. It was created through countless ordinary choices made every day. This perspective changes how we understand urgency. Urgency is not rushing through life. It is refusing to postpone what truly matters. There will always be another meeting, another purchase, another task waiting tomorrow. There may not always be another opportunity to forgive, to encourage, to thank someone, to spend time with family, or to become the person we continually promise ourselves we will become someday. Death quietly asks the question that comfort encourages us to ignore. If today were enough, would today have been well lived? That question has guided sages, kings, monks, philosophers, and ordinary people for thousands of years. It continues to guide us still. The final teacher does not speak with anger or fear. It speaks with clarity. Life is temporary. Therefore, love deeply, fic generously, fic wisdom faithfully. Leave behind more kindness than possessions. And remember that while no one escapes mortality, every person can choose the meaning they leave in its wake. Chapter 4. The wisdom hidden inside suffering. For thousands of years, humanity has searched for a way to escape suffering. Entire empires have pursued wealth to avoid it. Philosophers have sought understanding to explain it, and rulers have tried to control the future so they might never encounter it again. Yet every civilization eventually reached the same quiet realization. Suffering cannot always be avoided, but it can be transformed. The Stoics understood this with remarkable clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote many of his reflections, not from a peaceful retreat, but while surrounded by war, disease, political intrigue, and personal loss. His writings reveal a man who refused to allow pain to dictate his character. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" he continually returned to a more powerful question: "What is this experience asking me to become?" That single shift changes suffering from punishment into instruction. Ancient Egyptian wisdom also viewed hardship as a furnace that purified the human spirit. Gold, they observed, becomes brighter only after enduring intense fire. A rough stone becomes a polished monument only after countless strikes of the sculptor's hammer. Nature itself teaches that transformation rarely occurs without pressure. Human life follows the same mysterious pattern. Comfort often allows hidden weaknesses to sleep unnoticed. Pride grows quietly during easy seasons. Gratitude becomes casual. Relationships are taken for granted. We begin believing that tomorrow is guaranteed. Then hardship arrives without invitation. Illness enters the family. A trusted friendship breaks apart. A career unexpectedly ends. A loved one is lost. Plans carefully built over decades suddenly collapse in a single season. In those moments, something remarkable often happens. The masks fall away. What remains is not the life we imagined, but the person we truly are. History offers countless examples of individuals who emerged from suffering with deeper wisdom than they possessed before it. One such example comes from the life of the Greek philosopher Socrates. Though mocked by many, misunderstood by political leaders, and ultimately sentenced to death, he refused to betray his convictions merely to preserve his comfort. His external circumstances grew darker, yet his inner freedom remained untouched. Standing before the court that condemned him, Socrates displayed neither bitterness nor hatred. He understood that another person's injustice could wound his body, but could not corrupt his character unless he willingly surrendered it. His greatest victory was invisible. That quiet resilience has echoed through more than 2,000 years of history. Another ancient story tells of an elderly olive farmer whose grove was destroyed after years of drought. Everything he had patiently cultivated appeared lost. Neighbors expected despair, but each morning he returned to the barren land, carrying only a small shovel and a basket of new saplings. A traveler finally asked why he continued planting trees he might never live long enough to see mature. The old farmer smiled. "My grandfather planted the trees that fed me," he replied. "Now I plant for someone I will never meet." The traveler realized that suffering had not made the old man smaller, it had made him larger. Pain had expanded his vision beyond himself. This is one of suffering's hidden gifts. It teaches compassion. Those who have never experienced loneliness often overlook the isolated. Those who have never failed may judge harshly. Those who have never known grief sometimes struggle to comfort the grieving. But people who have walked through darkness often recognize the silent burdens carried by others. Their suffering becomes a bridge instead of a wall. Modern psychology increasingly confirms what many ancient traditions already understood. Resilience is not the absence of pain, but the ability to discover meaning within it. Human beings possess an extraordinary capacity to grow stronger through adversity, when hardship is met with reflection rather than resentment. This does not mean every tragedy carries an obvious lesson, or that every wound immediately heals. Ancient wisdom never suggested pretending pain does not hurt. Tears remain sacred. Grief deserves time. Loss leaves real scars, yet scars themselves tell a story. They remind us that healing is possible. They testify that survival can become wisdom. Perhaps that is why the deepest teachers throughout history rarely promised lives free from hardship. Instead, they taught people how to carry hardship without allowing it to poison the soul. Suffering changes everyone. The only unanswered question is whether it leaves us bitter or wiser. Choose wisely. Chapter 5. Control versus Acceptance. One of the smallest books in ancient philosophy contains one of the greatest secrets for inner peace. The Enchiridion, written from the teachings of Epictetus, begins with a simple observation that has transformed countless lives across centuries. Some things are within our control, many things are not. Nearly every human struggle begins when these two become confused. We attempt to control the opinions of others. We try to guarantee success before taking action. We fight against aging, unexpected change, uncertain futures, and the passage of time itself. The tighter we grip these uncontrollable realities, the more exhausted we become. Ancient Stoicism never encouraged passivity. It did not teach people to stop acting or abandon responsibility. Instead, It invited them to place their energy where it could actually create change. Your actions belong to you. Your choices belong to you. Your integrity belongs to you. Your attitude belongs to you. Everything else arrives with far less certainty. Imagine standing beside a great river. One traveler spends the entire day shouting at the current, demanding that it reverse direction. Another studies the flow, builds a sturdy boat, and learns how to navigate its movement. Both face the same river. Only one reaches the opposite shore. Acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is intelligent cooperation with reality. An old story from the teachings of Epictetus tells of a traveler caught in a violent storm while crossing the sea. As terrified passengers cried out in panic, an elderly sailor calmly secured the ropes, adjusted the sails, and quietly waited for the winds to settle. Afterwards, someone asked why he had remained so peaceful while everyone else had been overwhelmed by fear. The sailor answered, "I could not command the storm. I could command my hands." His wisdom reflected the heart of Stoic philosophy. Life continually presents storms beyond our choosing. We cannot always prevent illness, disappointment, aging, or loss. Yet we retain remarkable freedom over how we meet them. Every calm decision made during chaos becomes an act of inner sovereignty. This principle applies just as powerfully today. Many people exhaust themselves worrying about tomorrow, while neglecting the only moment in which they can actually act: the present. Anxiety often disguises itself as preparation, but endless worry rarely improves tomorrow. It merely steals today's strength. Acceptance restores that strength. It frees the mind from fighting reality and allows it to invest fully in wise action. When we stop demanding certainty, we become more available to courage. When we stop resisting every change, we discover unexpected opportunities hidden within change itself. Peace, then, is not found when life becomes perfectly predictable. Peace appears when the soul no longer depends upon perfect circumstances to remain steady. The ancient teachers understood a paradox that many still struggle to accept. The moment you stop trying to control everything is often the moment you finally begin mastering yourself. And that is the only mastery that can never be taken away. Chapter 6. The illusions humanity chases. Walk through the ruins of any ancient civilization, and one truth quietly reveals itself. The magnificent palaces have become broken stones. The treasures once guarded by armies lie buried beneath dust. The names of rulers who believed themselves immortal survive only as faint carvings weathered by centuries. Time has a remarkable way of exposing every illusion. Across history, humanity has pursued 5 promises with almost religious devotion: wealth, status, power, pleasure, and comparison. Each whispers the same seductive message: just a little more, and you will finally be complete. Yet countless generations have discovered that the finish line always moves farther away. The ancient writer of Ecclesiastes observed kings, merchants, laborers, and scholars, arriving at a sobering conclusion. Human desire behaves like drinking seawater. The more one consumes, the greater the thirst becomes. Possessions satisfy for a moment before the mind invents another standard, another ambition, another comparison. This is not because wealth itself is evil. Wealth can build hospitals, feed families, educate children, preserve culture, and relieve suffering. The illusion begins when wealth is mistaken for identity. Money can purchase comfort. It cannot purchase contentment. Dantes carries a similar deception. Human beings naturally seek respect, Yet many spend their entire lives chasing the approval of strangers whose opinions constantly change. Ancient philosophers often warned that applause is among the most unstable foundations upon which to build a life. Today's celebrated hero becomes tomorrow's forgotten name. The Stoics asked a piercing question: if your peace depends upon the praise of others, who truly governs your life? That question remains as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Power creates another illusion. At first, it appears to promise freedom, but history repeatedly shows that people consumed by power often become servants to protecting it. Suspicion replaces trust. Rest disappears. Every new rival becomes another source of fear. Alexander the Great conquered lands stretching across continents, yet ancient stories describe moments when even he reflected upon the endless nature of ambition. One mountain conquered simply revealed another beyond it. Victory without inner peace is only another form of exhaustion. Pleasure also possesses its own subtle trap. Ancient wisdom never denied the goodness of celebration, beauty, food, companionship, or rest. Rather, it warned against confusing temporary enjoyment with lasting fulfillment. Pleasure is a visitor. Meaning becomes a companion. When pleasure becomes life's highest goal, satisfaction slowly diminishes. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. Gratitude weakens. The heart demands stronger stimulation simply to feel what once came naturally. Then there is comparison. The quiet illusion that has haunted humanity across every age. Today it arrives through glowing screens and carefully curated lives. Long ago it appeared in marketplaces, royal courts, and village gatherings. Its appearance changes, but its effect remains identical. Comparison blinds people to their own blessings. An ancient rabbi once told of two merchants living beside one another. The first earned enough to provide generously for his family and neighbors. The second possessed twice as much, yet slept poorly every night because another merchant across town had become wealthier still. One lacked abundance, the other lacked peace. The poorer man was not the one with fewer coins. He was the one who could no longer see what he already possessed. The philosopher Socrates reportedly lived with remarkable simplicity despite having opportunities for greater comfort. Walking through a bustling marketplace filled with luxurious goods, he quietly remarked that he was amazed by how many things existed that he did not need. His words were not a rejection of prosperity. They were a declaration of freedom. The person who constantly needs more becomes dependent upon circumstances for happiness. The person who learns the wisdom of enough carries an inner wealth untouched by changing fortunes. Perhaps this explains why some of history's richest individuals have confessed profound emptiness, while others with modest means have radiated deep contentment. Fulfillment does not arise from accumulation alone. It grows from alignment between character, purpose, gratitude, and service. The greatest illusion humanity chases is not wealth, status, or pleasure themselves. It is the belief that something outside the soul can permanently complete what only wisdom can cultivate within. Enough begins inside. Chapter 7. The nature of life. Ancient philosophers viewed impermanence not as life's tragedy, but as one of its greatest teachers. Marcus Aurelius frequently reminded himself that empires rise and disappear. Beauty fades, children become elders, and every sunrise is unique because it will never be repeated in exactly the same way again. Far from creating despair, this awareness awakened gratitude. What is temporary becomes precious. Imagine receiving a flower that would bloom forever without fading. Its beauty might eventually become ordinary, but because the blossom lasts only a short time, every moment with it carries significance. Life resembles that flower. Its fragility gives it value. The ancient Egyptians observed the yearly flooding of the Nile as both destruction and blessing. Waters covered familiar fields, washing away what seemed permanent. Yet when they receded, richer soil remained, making future harvests possible. Sometimes what appears to be lost quietly prepares the ground for renewal. The same pattern unfolds within human lives. A career ends, making space for a calling never previously imagined. Children leave home, allowing parents to rediscover forgotten parts of themselves. Retirement closes one chapter, but opens another filled with opportunities for wisdom, mentorship, and reflection. Even grief, though deeply painful, often awakens compassion that comfort alone could never produce. An old story tells of an elderly potter who spent decades shaping clay into beautiful vessels. One afternoon, his grandson asked why he never became angry whenever a finished pot eventually cracked with age. The old craftsman smiled as he held a weathered bowl in his hands. "It was never meant to last forever," he said. "Its purpose was to serve beautifully while it could." Then he gently added, "So are we." Those simple words contain a profound truth. Aging is not merely the body growing older. It is the soul gathering perspective. Youth often seeks speed. Maturity begins seeking meaning. Young eyes frequently ask, "How much can I accomplish?" Older eyes often ask, "What truly matters?" This transformation is not decline. It is refinement. The passing years gradually strip away unnecessary ambitions and expose what endures. Kindness, integrity, family, friendship, wisdom, forgiveness, and love. These become life's true inheritance. Acceptance does not mean abandoning hope or ceasing to dream. It means embracing reality without demanding that reality conform to our wishes. We continue planting seeds while understanding that harvests arrive in their own season. We continue loving people while recognizing that every shared moment is a gift rather than a guarantee. The greatest paradox of life is this: because every moment passes, every moment matters. Impermanence does not diminish beauty, it creates it. When we stop resisting change, we begin participating more fully in life itself. Each season becomes a teacher. Each wrinkle becomes a story. Each farewell deepens our appreciation for every greeting that came before it. Life was never meant to be held tightly. It was meant to be lived gratefully, one sacred season at a time. Chapter 8. The Forgotten Language of the Soul. Modern life teaches us to keep moving. There is always another message to answer, another responsibility to fulfill, another distraction waiting to occupy the mind. Yet the more crowded our attention becomes, the more distant our inner life feels. Many people reach the later years of life having accumulated knowledge about countless subjects, while remaining strangers to themselves. The soul does not compete with noise. It simply waits. The philosopher Socrates insisted that an unexamined life could never become a fully lived life. His teaching was not merely intellectual. He believed every person carried an inner faculty capable of recognizing truth, if only they learned to listen. Throughout his life, he often spoke of an inner voice that restrained him from acting against wisdom. Whether one understands this symbolically or spiritually, the lesson remains powerful. Genuine insight often begins by becoming quiet enough to hear what constant activity has drowned out. The ancient desert fathers understood this better than most. They withdrew into barren landscapes, not because they despised humanity, but because they wished to remove every unnecessary distraction. In the silence of the wilderness, they discovered that the greatest battle was never against the outside world. It was against the endless conversations taking place within the mind. They learned that fear grows louder when ignored, pride disguises itself as certainty, and desire constantly invents new excuses. Yet beneath all of these voices rested something deeper, an awareness untouched by passing emotions. Silence reveals what noise conceals. This is why solitude has been honored by wise men and women across civilizations. Solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected from others. Solitude is the privilege of becoming reacquainted with oneself. One leaves loneliness by finding companionship. One enters solitude by finding presence. There is an old Egyptian story about a young scribe who desperately wished to inherit the wisdom of an elderly temple teacher. Expecting to receive secret scrolls or hidden formulas, he repeatedly begged his master for instruction. The elder simply led him to the bank of the Nile before sunrise and invited him to sit in silence. Day after day, this continued. The young man grew frustrated. "When will the teaching begin?" he finally asked. The old teacher smiled gently. "It began the moment you stopped speaking." Only then did the young scribe begin noticing the rhythm of the river, the movement of birds, the changing colors of the morning sky, and the restless thoughts continually passing through his own mind. He realized that wisdom had never been absent. His attention had been elsewhere. So it is with the human soul. Prayer, in its deepest sense, is not merely speaking toward heaven. It is becoming quiet enough for the heart to remember what it already knows. Meditation is not escaping reality, but entering it without the usual layers of anxiety, comparison, and distraction. Reflection is not dwelling on the past, but allowing experience to become understanding. Many people spend years asking life for answers, while rarely creating space to receive them. The language of the soul is subtle. It appears as an unexpected feeling of peace when making the right decision. It arrives as quiet conviction rather than dramatic certainty. Sometimes it emerges through gratitude after suffering, or through compassion born from one's own wounds. It whispers, "The world often celebrates speed, but wisdom matures slowly, like an ancient tree extending roots far beneath the earth before reaching toward the sky." The deepest growth occurs where few people are looking. The individual who spends a few moments each day in honest reflection gradually develops a clarity that cannot be borrowed from books or inherited through tradition alone. For eventually, every person discovers that the greatest questions cannot be answered by constant activity. They are answered by learning to listen. The soul has never forgotten the way home. It has simply been waiting for silence. Chapter 9. The Lost Art of Inner Peace. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding about peace is believing it appears only after life finally becomes comfortable. Many spend decades telling themselves, "When my problems disappear, then I will rest. When my finances improve, when my health returns, when my family agrees, when uncertainty ends, then I will know peace." Yet history quietly tells another story. Some of the most comfortable lives have been filled with restless hearts, while many who endured hardship carried an extraordinary calm that no circumstance could steal. Peace is not the absence of storms. It is the presence of an inner anchor. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus spent much of his early life as a slave. By ordinary standards, he possessed little control over external circumstances. Yet his writings continue to inspire people centuries later because he discovered a profound freedom that no master could imprison. He recognized a distinction that transforms human life. There are things we influence, and there are things we do not. Peace begins when we stop demanding control over what has never belonged to us. Acceptance is often misunderstood as surrendering to defeat. Ancient wisdom saw it differently. Acceptance means seeing reality clearly before responding wisely. A sailor cannot command the wind, but by understanding it, he learns to guide the sails. Likewise, the wise person does not waste strength arguing with life's inevitable seasons. Instead, they ask how best to meet them. Reality is resisted. Peace is received. Imagine standing in a river, struggling against its current hour after hour. Exhaustion would soon overcome you. Now imagine turning your body, learning the rhythm of the water, and allowing its movement to assist rather than oppose you. The river has not changed. Only your relationship with it has. So it is with life. Much of our suffering comes not only from pain itself, but from insisting that pain should never have arrived. We resist aging, loss, disappointment, uncertainty, and change, as though they were personal injustices rather than universal experiences shared by every generation before us. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that whatever happens to one human being has happened countless times throughout history. This realization did not make suffering insignificant. Instead, it made it bearable. He understood he was participating in the same human story that had shaped philosophers, kings, laborers, parents, and teachers across centuries. There is an ancient tale of an old gardener whose orchard was repeatedly struck by harsh seasons. One year, frost destroyed nearly every blossom. The following year, drought withered much of the harvest. Yet visitors always found the old man tending his trees with quiet contentment. When asked why he never seemed discouraged, he answered simply, "I care for the garden. I do not command the seasons." Within those few words lies an entire philosophy of peace. We are responsible for our effort. We are not masters of every outcome. This understanding transforms relationships as well. Peace grows when we release the impossible burden of controlling every person's opinion, every future event, and every uncertainty. Instead, we become guardians of what truly belongs to us: our character, our responses, our kindness, our integrity, and our willingness to meet each day with wisdom. Mere stillness is not emotional numbness. It is the quiet confidence that even amid uncertainty, one can choose patience over panic, understanding over resentment, and hope over despair. The world will always remain unpredictable, but the heart need not become chaotic simply because life is. The ancient teachers did not promise lives without hardship. They offered something far greater: a way of remaining whole while walking through hardship. That is the lost art of inner peace. It does not wait for perfect circumstances. It quietly transforms the imperfect ones. Chapter 10. Finding Purpose Beyond Achievement. There comes a season in nearly every human life when achievement no longer answers the questions it once promised to solve. For years, a person may climb toward promotions, accumulate possessions, earn recognition, and accomplish goals that once seemed impossible. Yet when the applause fades and the celebrations become memories, another question quietly emerges from within. Was this all for? This question is not a sign of failure. It is often the beginning of wisdom. ancient philosophers understood something modern culture frequently forgets. Achievement can build a successful life, but only purpose can build a meaningful one. A title may describe what you do. Wealth may measure what you possess. Reputation may reflect what others think of you, but purpose answers a far deeper question. It reveals why you exist and how your life becomes a blessing to others. Aristotle observed that every action aims toward some good, yet the highest good is not found in endless acquisition, but in living according to virtue. Likewise, the Stoics believed that the worth of a life could never be measured by fortune alone. A person who governed an empire but neglected justice had achieved much while becoming little. Another who lived humbly yet cultivated wisdom, compassion, and integrity had fulfilled a far greater calling. Purpose outlives success. Many people unknowingly confuse identity with occupation. They introduce themselves by describing their profession, their accomplishments, or the roles they perform. Yet life eventually changes every role. Careers end. Businesses close. Children grow independent. Strength fades with age. When identity depends entirely upon external roles, every transition feels like the loss of oneself. The ancients warned against this quiet danger. They taught that identity must rest upon character rather than circumstance. A teacher remains a servant of wisdom even after retirement. A parent continues shaping generations long after children leave home. A craftsman's purpose is not merely to produce beautiful objects, but to embody patience, excellence, and devotion in every task. The external form may change, but the inner calling remains. There is an old Greek story of a renowned sculptor whose statues adorned temples throughout the city. As his fame spread, wealthy patrons competed for his work. Yet when visitors praised his masterpieces, the sculptor simply smiled and returned to his workshop. One young apprentice finally asked, "Master, do you never grow tired of creating after so many years?" The old man replied, "I was never carving statues for applause. I was carving myself." The apprentice was puzzled. The sculptor continued, "Each stone teaches patience. Each mistake teaches humility. Each finished work reminds me that my greatest creation has never been the marble before me, but the character within me." Years later, after the sculptor's works had weathered and some had crumbled, people still remembered the kindness with which he trained young artists, the fairness with which he treated strangers, and the peace that surrounded him. His true masterpiece had never stood in the marketplace. It had lived within the lives he quietly transformed. So it is with every meaningful life. Purpose rarely announces itself with grand spectacles. More often, it is discovered in ordinary faithfulness, encouraging a discouraged friend, raising children with patience, serving one's community with honesty, caring for aging parents with dignity, offering wisdom freely without seeking recognition. The deepest purpose often hides inside the simplest acts. History remembers kings and conquerors, yet entire civilizations were preserved by countless unnamed teachers, healers, laborers, mothers, fathers, and neighbors who quietly lived with integrity. Their names may have disappeared from history, but the goodness they passed forward continues through generations they never lived to see. Recognition is temporary. Contribution is eternal. As people grow older, many discover that the achievements once occupying every waking thought gradually lose their urgency. Instead, relationships deepen in value. Character becomes more precious than reputation. Peace becomes more desirable than competition. One begins asking not, How much have I accomplished? But whom have I helped become stronger because I lived? This shift is not decline, it is awakening. Purpose is found wherever your gifts meet another person's need. It asks less about how high you climb and more about how deeply you serve. It reminds us that significance is measured not by applause received, but by lives quietly enriched through our presence. The greatest achievements eventually become memories. A life lived with purpose becomes a legacy. Chapter 11. Relationships, humanity's greatest wealth. Imagine an elderly traveler reaching the end of a long journey. His house is large, his accounts are full, his accomplishments fill many pages. Yet as evening falls and the years gather behind him, none of these things sit beside his bed. People do. The voices remembered most clearly are not those who praised his success, but those who shared his burdens, celebrated his joys, forgave his failures, and remained faithful through changing seasons. This is the wisdom every civilization eventually discovered. People are life's greatest treasure. Everything else is borrowed. Confucius taught that the quality of society begins with the quality of human relationships. Families shape communities. Communities shape nations. Before laws can produce harmony, hearts must learn respect, kindness, loyalty, and compassion. Civilization itself rests upon invisible threads woven between human beings. Love is not merely an emotion, it is daily devotion. Ancient wisdom repeatedly returns to this simple truth because human beings are created not only to accomplish, but to belong. A person may possess extraordinary intelligence and remarkable wealth, yet without genuine relationships, life often feels strangely incomplete. Success satisfies ambition. Love satisfies the soul. There is an old Egyptian story of an aging official who spent decades serving the royal court. Near the end of his life, a young nobleman asked him what achievement had brought him the greatest satisfaction. The youth expected stories of political victories, magnificent buildings, or royal honors. Instead, the old man answered quietly. The titles remained in the palace. My friendships walked home with me. He explained that every position he had once held eventually belonged to another. Every ceremony faded into memory. But the people whose lives he had encouraged, protected, and served remained his greatest inheritance. The young nobleman never forgot those words. Neither should we. Friendship possesses a mysterious power. A true friend does more than accompany us during pleasant days. They remind us who we are when disappointment clouds our vision. They speak truth when comfort would be easier. They celebrate without envy and correct without humiliation. Such friendships cannot be purchased because they are built through years of trust, sacrifice, forgiveness, and shared experience. Family, too, teaches lessons no school can provide. Within families, we encounter patience, responsibility, generosity, conflict, reconciliation, and unconditional love. Every meal shared, every conversation held, every hardship endured together quietly forms the architecture of the human heart. Service strengthens every relationship. The more we ask, how can I contribute, instead of what can I receive, the richer our relationships become. Ancient traditions across the world recognize that genuine love is demonstrated not through grand declarations, but through consistent acts of care. A helping hand, an attentive ear, a word of encouragement, a forgiving spirit. These simple gifts often carry greater value than expensive possessions. The paradox is beautiful. The more love is given, the more abundant it becomes. As the years pass, Many older people speak less about the promotions they earned and more about the people they loved. They remember conversations, shared laughter, unexpected kindnesses, family gatherings, lifelong friendships, and moments when someone simply stayed beside them during difficult times. These memories become treasures no thief can steal. In the end, wealth may provide comfort, but relationships provide belonging. Achievement may impress the world, but love transforms it. Recognition may fade with time, but compassion echoes through generations. Perhaps this is why the wisest teachers throughout history placed relationships at the center of a meaningful life. They understood that every human heart is shaped not only by what it accomplishes, but by whom it loves. When the final accounting of life arrives, few people wish they had earned one more title or accumulated one more possession. Most simply wish they had loved more deeply, forgiven more quickly, served more generously, and treasured the people who quietly made life worth living. For humanity's greatest wealth has never been stored in vaults. It has always lived in one another. Chapter 12. Living with Enough. There is a question that quietly follows every human being throughout life, though few ever stop long enough to hear it. How much is enough? Most people spend their younger years believing the answer lies somewhere ahead. One more promotion, one larger home, one greater achievement, one more possession, one final milestone. Yet each destination soon becomes another beginning, and the horizon continues moving farther away. The ancient teachers understood this restless pursuit long before the modern world gave it new names. They observed that endless wanting is not simply a habit of the hands. It is a condition of the heart. A cup with no bottom can never be filled. The Stoics taught that true wealth is measured not by the abundance of possessions, but by the absence of unnecessary desires. Likewise, the sages of the East often compared the mind to a lake. When stirred constantly by craving, its surface becomes too turbulent to reflect reality. But when desire settles into contentment, clarity returns naturally. Living with enough does not require rejecting prosperity or embracing poverty. Ancient wisdom never glorified needless deprivation. Instead, it taught stewardship rather than slavery. Possessions become dangerous only when they begin possessing the person. There is a profound difference between owning many things and believing that those things define your worth. Many discover this truth only after decades of accumulation. Closets become crowded, garages overflow, calendars fill with obligations, yet peace remains strangely absent. The more they own, the more there is to protect, maintain, insure, organize, and worry about. What once promised freedom quietly becomes another burden. Sometimes abundance creates another form of captivity. The wise eventually realize that simplicity is not the absence of richness. It is the removal of everything that prevents richness from being experienced. Imagine entering an ancient monastery high among the mountains. The room of an elderly monk contains little more than a wooden table, a chair, a bed, a worn scroll, and a clay lamp. A traveler, astonished by such simplicity, asks, "Where are your possessions?" The old monk smiles gently. "Where are yours?" The traveler laughs. "I am only passing through, so am I," replies the monk. Those few words contain a lifetime of wisdom. Every civilization has attempted, in its own language, to remind humanity that life itself is temporary. We arrive with empty hands and depart the same way. Between those two moments, we are invited to become caretakers rather than owners. grateful participants rather than anxious collectors. Gratitude transforms this understanding into daily practice. A grateful person begins noticing blessings that constant ambition overlooks. Morning sunlight across a familiar table, the laughter of grandchildren, a quiet conversation with an old friend, the comfort of ordinary routines, the strength to walk, to breathe, to love another day. None of these appear extraordinary, yet together they form an extraordinary life. Psychologically, gratitude interrupts the endless comparison that fuels dissatisfaction. The mind cannot simultaneously dwell in appreciation and scarcity. One enlarges peace, the other enlarges longing. Ancient philosophers understood that attention determines experience. What the heart continually counts becomes the measure of its reality. This is why some people possess little yet radiate contentment, while others accumulate fortunes yet remain perpetually restless. Their circumstances differ, but the deeper difference lies in perception. Enough is not a number. It is a way of seeing. There is an old story told among the villages of ancient Anatolia. A prosperous merchant traveled to visit a shepherd whose wisdom had become famous throughout the region, expecting to find hidden treasure or secret knowledge. The merchant instead discovered the shepherd, sitting beneath an olive tree, quietly sharing bread with several children. After watching for a while, the merchant finally asked, "When will you gather enough sheep to become wealthy?" The shepherd looked across the hillside and answered, "When will you gather enough gold to become peaceful?" Neither man spoke for several moments. Years later, the merchant returned, not richer, but wiser. He confessed that despite decades of successful trade, he had never learned to enjoy what he already possessed. The shepherd welcomed him again beneath the same tree. This time they shared bread together, and for the first time in many years, the merchant felt no urgency to become someone else or to acquire something more. That afternoon, he discovered the wealth he had been seeking all along. Living with enough does not mean abandoning ambition. It means allowing gratitude to guide ambition, instead of allowing ambition to replace gratitude. It means pursuing excellence without sacrificing peace, working diligently without becoming consumed by comparison, and receiving life's blessings with open hands rather than clenched fists. For the richest life is rarely the one that owns the most. It is the one that recognizes enough when it quietly arrives. Chapter 13. Wisdom for the second half of life. Every sunrise brings something new into the world. Every sunset quietly asks what we have become. The second half of life invites a different kind of success. Youth often measures life by accumulation, learning more, building more, proving more. But maturity gradually introduces another calling, releasing what is no longer necessary so that wisdom may remain. Growing older is inevitable. Becoming an elder is intentional. Many civilizations honored elders not because of the number of years they had lived, but because of what those years had produced within them. Wrinkles alone were never considered wisdom. Gray hair alone did not guarantee understanding. Time merely revealed whether experience had been transformed into compassion, humility, patience, and discernment. Life teaches everyone. Only some become students. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that every passing day shortened the distance to death, not as a reason for despair, but as an invitation to live more deliberately. Ancient Egyptian wisdom likewise urged leaders to cultivate humility before age made humility unavoidable. Across cultures, the message remained remarkably consistent. Prepare your soul as carefully as you prepare your career. The second half of life asks quieter questions. Have you learned to forgive? Can you release resentment before it hardens into bitterness? Have disappointments made you wiser instead of colder? Can you celebrate another person's success without envy? These questions matter far more than the titles engraved upon office doors. One of the greatest gifts of aging is perspective. The arguments that once seemed urgent become insignificant. The possessions once fiercely protected lose their importance. Many fears quietly dissolve. One begins recognizing how precious ordinary days truly are. A shared meal becomes more meaningful than an expensive banquet. A peaceful afternoon becomes richer than constant excitement. Presence gradually replaces performance. This change is not loss, it is refinement. There is an ancient story from China about an elderly calligrapher whose work was admired throughout the kingdom. Near the end of his life, young students traveled great distances, hoping to learn the secret behind his beautiful writing. Expecting complicated techniques, they instead found the old master carefully watering a small garden before touching his brush. One impatient student finally asked, "Master, when will you teach us your greatest skill?" The old man smiled. "I already have." The students looked confused. "For 50 years, he explained, I believed beautiful writing came from perfect hands. Only later did I discover it comes from a peaceful heart. Tend your heart first. Your hands will eventually follow." His finest lesson had never been written on paper. It had been written through the way he lived. This is the true work of an elder. An elder becomes a bridge between generations. They offer perspective where others bring urgency. They provide calm where others bring anxiety. They remind younger hearts that storms pass, seasons change, and many fears disappear with time. They teach not merely through speeches, but through presence itself. Mentorship becomes one of life's highest forms of service. Knowledge kept for oneself eventually fades. Wisdom shared continues living through others. Perhaps this is why the later years can become among the richest of all. Freed from the constant need to prove themselves, many people finally discover the freedom simply to become themselves. They begin investing less in reputation and more in relationships, less in appearance and more in authenticity, less in achievement and more in legacy. For legacy is not measured by monuments or wealth alone. It is measured by the people who become wiser because you lived. The final chapters of life need not be chapters of decline. They can become chapters of illumination, where accumulated experience ripens into quiet wisdom, where ambition matures into service, and where success is finally measured not by what one has gathered, but by what one has generously given away. In the end, the world does not simply need older people. It needs elders whose lives have become living books. Books that teach courage without speaking loudly, compassion without demanding recognition, and wisdom without seeking applause. Such people remind every generation that the greatest achievement is not merely to grow old, it is to grow whole. Chapter 14. Character. The only possession time cannot steal. There comes a moment in nearly every life when a quiet realization appears without announcement. Everything we have worked so hard to collect can one day be separated from us. Health weakens. Wealth changes hands. Titles are forgotten. Beauty fades. Influence shifts. Even the houses we build eventually belong to strangers. Time, with its patient hands, removes nearly everything we once believed permanent. Yet the ancient philosophers insisted that one treasure remains untouched: character. It is the only possession that cannot be inherited, borrowed, purchased, or stolen. It must be built one decision at a time, often when no one else is watching. The wisdom traditions of Greece, Egypt, China, and Rome all arrived at this same conclusion, despite being separated by centuries and continents. They taught that a person's greatest achievement is not what they accumulate, but who they become. Reputation belongs to other people. Character belongs to you. Many spend their lives protecting their reputation while quietly neglecting their character. Reputation depends upon opinion, and opinion changes as quickly as the wind. One generation praises what another condemns. Crowds are easily persuaded. Applause is temporary. Character, however, remains steady even when misunderstood. A person of integrity chooses what is right, even when doing so costs comfort, opportunity, or recognition. Ancient teachers regarded this as the highest form of freedom. A person governed by conscience cannot easily be controlled by praise or fear. Socrates demonstrated this truth during his trial in Athens. Offered opportunities to abandon his convictions, he refused to purchase safety at the expense of truth. His judges possessed authority over his body, but not over his principles. They could pronounce a sentence, but they could not rewrite the kind of man he had become. His character outlived the courtroom. Thousands of years later, his words still inspire those seeking wisdom, while the names of many who condemned him have faded into history. Such is the quiet endurance of virtue. Psychologically, character is built long before great moments arrive. Extraordinary decisions are usually the visible expression of ordinary habits repeated over many years. Honesty grows through countless small truths. Courage develops through many small acts of faithfulness. Compassion is strengthened every time kindness is chosen over indifference. No great oak appears overnight. Neither does a noble soul. The ancient Egyptian sages often taught that every action leaves an invisible mark upon the person performing it. Whether or not others witness the deed matters less than the effect it has upon the heart. Every choice gradually shapes the one who chooses. In this way, life becomes both sculptor and stone. There is an old story told about an elderly judge who served a small desert kingdom with remarkable fairness for more than 40 years. Travelers admired his wisdom, and rulers sought his counsel. Near the end of his life, a young official asked how he had earned such universal respect. The old judge shook his head gently. "I never tried to earn respect." The young man looked puzzled. "I tried to deserve it." Then he added, "Many people polish their image. Very few polish their soul." Those words spread farther than any royal decree he had ever signed. Integrity often requires quiet sacrifice. Sometimes it asks us to return money no one expected us to repay. Sometimes it asks us to admit mistakes before they are discovered. Sometimes it asks us to remain truthful when dishonesty would seem easier. These moments rarely attract applause, yet they strengthen the invisible architecture of the soul. Character grows in silence. Every civilization eventually forgets its wealth. Monuments crumble. Kingdoms disappear. Markets rise and fall. Yet stories of honorable men and women continue traveling across generations because they remind humanity of something greater than success. They remind us of what is possible. As life moves toward its later seasons, this truth becomes increasingly clear. Few people lie awake wishing they had accumulated one more possession. Many, however, wish they had spoken more kindly, forgiven more quickly, loved more generously, and lived more honestly. These regrets are not about achievement, they are about character. For when time finally asks us to release everything else, it cannot take away the person we have become. That is the one treasure we carry beyond every changing season. Chapter 15. The Art of Living Before Time Runs Out. We often imagine that meaning will arrive someday in the future, after one more accomplishment, one more obligation, one more season of busyness. Meanwhile, the ordinary days quietly become the extraordinary life we thought was still waiting ahead. The ancient philosophers urged people to remember mortality not as a burden but as a guide. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself each morning as though the day might be his last, not because he expected death, but because such awareness purified his priorities. When time is remembered, trivial concerns lose their power. Mortality clarifies. It removes illusion. To live before time runs out is not to live anxiously. It is to live attentively. Every conversation becomes more precious. Every sunrise becomes a gift rather than an expectation. Every opportunity to forgive becomes more urgent. Every act of kindness becomes an investment in something larger than ourselves. Presence is not merely awareness. It is gratitude made visible. Modern life often persuades people that constant activity is the same as meaningful living. Ancient wisdom gently disagrees. A person may hurry through decades without ever truly noticing them. Another may live more slowly, paying attention to small moments, and discover immeasurable richness within an ordinary existence. The difference is rarely found in circumstance. It is found in attention. Daily choices shape destiny more reliably than dramatic moments. A single encouraging word can restore another person's hope. One honest decision can preserve years of trust. One afternoon spent listening deeply to a loved one may become a memory treasured long after countless busy days have been forgotten. Great lives are built quietly. The Odyssey tells of Odysseus spending years longing to return home. His journey was filled with storms, temptations, victories, and failures, yet the deepest lesson was not about adventure. It was about remembering what truly mattered. Every challenge gradually stripped away illusion until only purpose remained. Sometimes life sends us on long journeys simply to help us recognize what was valuable from the beginning. There is an old story from a mountain village where an aging stonemason spent decades building bridges across dangerous rivers. When he became too old to lift heavy stones, a young apprentice asked him which bridge had been his greatest achievement. The old craftsman smiled and pointed not toward the valley, but toward the village itself. "The bridges I built from stone will someday collapse," he said. "The bridges I built between people may last much longer." The apprentice looked around in confusion. "I taught patience to one worker, courage to another, honesty to a third. Those are the bridges I hope remain." Years after the old mason had died, travelers still crossed the rivers on newer bridges built by those he had trained. Yet even more important, they encountered a community known for generosity, fairness, and trust. His greatest construction had never been made of stone. It had been made of lives. This is the invitation waiting before every human being, not merely to exist, not merely to succeed, but to live so intentionally that each day contributes something beautiful to the world, however small it may appear. Perhaps courage is simply choosing kindness when resentment feels easier. Perhaps purpose is found in serving faithfully where you already stand. perhaps wisdom is learning that today's ordinary moments are tomorrow's treasured memories. Time continues flowing, whether we notice it or not. But awareness transforms passing moments into meaningful ones. One day, every calendar will end. Until then, let each morning become an opportunity to begin again. Let each conversation carry sincerity. Let each decision reflect the person you hope to become. Let gratitude accompany ambition, and let love guide achievement. For the greatest tragedy is not that life is short. It is that many discover how precious it was only after most of it has already passed. Live while the hourglass still holds sand. Live with courage. Live with presence. Live so completely that when the final page is written, it tells not merely the story of a long life, but the story of a life deeply and wisely lived. Chapter 16. The Measure of a Well-Lived Life. Most people spend their lives asking a question they never speak aloud. How will I know if my life mattered? Society answers quickly. It points to bank accounts, titles, achievements, awards, houses, and influence. Yet when we walk through the ruins of ancient civilizations, we discover something astonishing. The names history remembers are rarely those who merely accumulated the most. They are the ones whose character outlived their possessions. Time has always been the great examiner. It strips away everything temporary until only what was genuine remains. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the greatest empires in history, yet his private reflections rarely celebrated conquest or wealth. Instead, he reminded himself daily to remain humble, just, patient, and kind. He understood that emperors and servants eventually meet the same end. What distinguishes one life from another is not what was owned, but what was cultivated within. Confucius offered a similar lesson centuries earlier. He taught that a society becomes healthy only when individuals first become honorable. A person's influence, he believed, flowed from integrity rather than authority. Leadership without virtue eventually collapses beneath its own weight, while quiet goodness continues shaping generations long after applause has faded. Even farther back, the Egyptian sage Ptahhotep advised rulers to speak gently, judge fairly, and remember that arrogance always precedes decline. Kingdoms rise and disappear, he observed, but wisdom continues traveling from one heart to another. That inheritance never loses value. These teachers belonged to different cultures, yet they measured success with the same invisible scale: integrity, compassion, wisdom, courage, generosity, faithfulness, dorev. These qualities cannot be purchased because they are forged through thousands of ordinary decisions. Every moment offers another opportunity to become either slightly wiser or slightly more careless. Character grows quietly, almost invisibly, much like the roots of an ancient cedar spreading beneath the earth, long before anyone notices its towering height. Aristotle described this flourishing as living according to virtue. Happiness, he argued, was never merely a pleasant feeling, but the natural consequence of repeatedly choosing what is good. Excellence was not an event. It was a habit. A person became courageous by acting courageously, generous by giving generously, truthful by speaking truth consistently. Destiny was built one decision at a time. Modern culture often reverses this wisdom. We assume possessions create peace, that recognition creates confidence, or that success automatically produces fulfillment. Yet countless people achieve everything they once desired, only to discover that inner emptiness has quietly accompanied them to the summit. External victories cannot replace internal formation. A person may own many houses while never feeling at home within themselves. Another may possess little yet carry such tranquility that everyone who meets them senses an uncommon richness. This invisible wealth has always fascinated humanity. The Stoics called it virtue. The sages called it wisdom. Many spiritual traditions called it the treasure that neither rust nor thieves could destroy. Each pointed toward the same mystery. The greatest possessions cannot be stored in vaults because they exist within consciousness itself. Imagine two funerals separated only by a few streets. At the first, people describe expensive achievements, prestigious titles, and remarkable financial success. Yet when the speeches end, silence quickly replaces admiration because few hearts were genuinely touched. At the second, there are fewer accomplishments to list. Yet family members speak through tears about patience, kindness, encouragement, forgiveness, and unwavering love. Friends remember conversations that changed their lives decades earlier. Children recall feeling safe simply because that person existed. Which life was richer? History quietly answers the second, because people rarely remember what someone owned. They remember how someone made them feel. Ancient civilizations understood this better than many modern societies. They believed every generation borrowed life temporarily before handing it to the next. Wealth could help this transfer, but wisdom determined whether the inheritance became a blessing or a burden. Perhaps this is why the oldest teachings repeatedly ask us to examine ourselves before attempting to improve the world. Your reputation belongs to other people. Your character belongs to you. Reputation changes with rumor. Character grows through truth. One depends upon public opinion. The other depends upon private choices. When titles disappear, when careers conclude, when strength fades with age, one possession still remains untouched. Who you became, that is the only treasure time cannot steal. An old tradition tells of an elderly judge who retired after decades of public service. A young official asked him how he wished to be remembered. The old man smiled gently and pointed toward a weathered olive tree standing beside the village road. "I planted that tree when I first became judge," he said. "Many travelers have rested beneath its shade. Children have climbed its branches. Birds have nested there every spring. Most of them never learned my name." The young official looked confused. The judge continued, "If my life resembles that tree, then memory no longer matters." Years later, the judge's records disappeared during a fire. His titles were forgotten. His accomplishments faded into history. Yet the olive tree continued giving fruit and shade to strangers who would never know who planted it. Such is the quiet power of a well-lived life. The truest measure is never what remains in your hands. It is what continues growing in the hearts of others. Chapter 17. The courage to begin again. Every civilization has honored those who discovered the strength to begin again, not because they never failed, but because failure became the doorway through which wisdom entered. One of the most dangerous illusions we carry is the belief that our mistakes permanently define us. We imagine that one broken season determines the remainder of our story. Yet nature itself teaches the opposite lesson. Forests recover after fire. Rivers carve new paths around fallen stone. Winter always appears final until spring quietly proves otherwise. Life speaks the language of renewal. Human beings simply forget how to listen. Ancient philosophers often described pride as a heavier burden than poverty. Pride refuses to admit weakness. Pride clings to appearances long after truth demands surrender. Pride fears beginning again because it mistakes restarting for failure. Wisdom sees something entirely different. Every new beginning is evidence that hope still lives. The Stoics encouraged people to greet each morning as another opportunity to practice virtue, regardless of yesterday's mistakes. They understood that regret becomes useful only when it teaches rather than imprisons. What cannot be changed should become instruction, never identity. An old story tells of an aging philosopher who spent decades serving as advisor to wealthy merchants. He was respected for his learning, admired for his influence, and surrounded by comfort. Then political turmoil swept through the region. His patrons disappeared. His possessions were confiscated. His reputation collapsed almost overnight. Friends avoided him. Former students no longer greeted him. Everything he believed permanent vanished within a single year. For months he wandered from village to village, carrying only a small satchel of scrolls. Many assumed his life had ended in tragedy, yet something unexpected happened during those lonely travels. Without wealth to defend, without status to maintain, without admiration to pursue, he finally met himself. He discovered that much of his identity had quietly depended upon the opinions of others. Once those opinions disappeared, fear initially rushed in. But after fear settled, silence revealed something deeper. He was still capable of kindness, still capable of wisdom, still capable of wonder. Nothing essential had been taken. Years later, younger seekers began traveling great distances simply to hear the old philosopher speak. They expected complicated theories. Instead, he offered a single lesson. "I lost everything that could be stolen," he told them, and only then discovered what could not. His greatest wisdom was born after his greatest collapse. Such stories repeat throughout history because they mirror a universal law. Life often begins again where pride finally ends. Psychologically, this transformation requires enormous courage. The mind prefers familiar suffering over unfamiliar possibility. Even painful habits become comfortable because they are known. Beginning again asks us to exchange certainty for growth. That is why courage is not the absence of fear. It is movement despite fear. Older generations often understand this truth better than younger ones. They have survived losses, illnesses, disappointments, changing careers, broken relationships, and seasons that seemed impossible while living through them. Looking backward, many discover that their deepest wisdom emerged not during comfort but during reconstruction. Brokenness became preparation, failure became refinement, loss became redirection. This does not mean suffering is desirable. Rather, it means suffering never possesses the final word unless we surrender our capacity to grow. Ancient craftsmen, repairing cracked pottery, sometimes filled the fractures with precious metals, allowing the repaired vessel to become more beautiful than before. The visible cracks no longer represented shame. They testified to endurance. Human lives follow the same mysterious pattern. The healed heart often shines more brightly than the untouched one. Every setback carries two invisible invitations: become bitter or become wiser. Every ending offers another choice: remain imprisoned by yesterday or step quietly toward tomorrow. The remarkable truth is that beginning again rarely requires dramatic action. It often starts with one honest conversation, one forgiven resentment, one disciplined morning, one humble apology, one courageous decision to stop pretending. Great transformations are built from ordinary faithfulness. As this journey draws toward its close, perhaps the question is no longer whether life has wounded you. Every life bears scars. The deeper question is this: what will you build from those scars? The civilizations we